Morgan, you're going to lead us in the pledge. We'd all stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a skeleton crew here tonight, but they're our best. We're missing Councilman Orleans, Councilman Eichelhart, and Councilmember Wynn, but we've got an excellent council with us here tonight. First item is the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I need to recuse myself on one item on the agenda, and since that would result in a lack of a quorum, if we could pull one item off.
Which item is that?
It's item number 2.
All right, we will hold that off of the, pull that off the calendar. That'll be deferred to the next regular council meeting.
I'll vote for it. I'll vote for it. I'll vote twice.
Well, the abstention does not, Mr. Davidson, recusal, if you believe you are not qualified to sit in consideration of, if you just wish to abstain from the vote, we can pass it, but if you believe that you're not qualified to sit in hearing of it, that's a recusal.
I spoke with the city attorney earlier, and he said I need to recuse myself.
All right, well then that needs to come off the calendar. And so that would be the consent agenda with item 1, 3, and 4. Do we have a motion to approve 1, 3, and 4? Motion by Councilman Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Price. Does anyone hear any questions about the consent agenda? Items 1, 3, and 4. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Next item. Caleb, if you'll call the, first of all, do we have any deferrals tonight? In case there's anybody here waiting on something that might be deferred, let's hear any deferrals. I think there was the golf card ordinance was it was said it was going to be discussed in the first meeting in December, and so do we want to defer that? Do we have a motion to defer item 12?
So moved.
Motion to defer item 12, approval of the golf carts at 25-mile-an-hour streets or less by Councilmember DiPolito. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Price. Does anyone here have any questions regarding the golf carts? That'll be coming back at the first meeting in December. Councilmember Price.
Is there anybody here specifically for that item?
Seeing no hands up, I'm going to take that as a no. So we have a motion to defer golf carts until December. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Any other items that we need to discuss deferring? Councilmember Diamond.
I would like to request that we defer item number 1 on the admin. You may have received an email that we all received. It was a little late in the day, and there's some more information and some questions that I have, and I'm not sure what everybody else would like to do, but I would like a little more time on that one.
So you're moving to defer item number 1, approval of the wellness program?
Yes, sir.
Motion by Councilman Diamond for deferral. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone here in the audience come for this item or have any questions about the deferral? Councilmember Price.
Can you refer me to the email and for what time was it sent?
5:33.
Oh, that was the other one. That's
No,
not
ma'am,
the other
it's
one.
not, no, ma'am.
It's that one?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any further discussion of the motion to defer? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Any other items which the council member believes should be deferred until we have a full council? We'll move ahead then. Kay, if you'll call the admin finance calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next item is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with North Fulton Hospital Tenet Healthcare Corp. for the occupational health services preferred provider in the estimated amount of $15,700. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Kay. This is for our occupational medicine provider. There were proposals that were given to the city, and after review of 5 proposals, there were 3 that were brought in for oral presentations. Out of those 3, North Fulton Hospital Tenet Healthcare Corporation was the most responsible party. This is services that we use for employment and for employees. Some of our screening tests that we do, treatment for work-related injuries, emergencies, the medical care that we get from the employee's standpoint. So our recommendation is that we go with North Fulton Hospital Tenet Services.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Diamond. Motion approved by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DePolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments regarding the North Fulton Occupational Health Services contract? Any further discussion by council?
Well, going back to the previous item, I see that I did not get this email because unlike the others who seem to have been sent in their name, mine was Roswell Gov with an E on it, so it was incorrect. So I'd like to pull my support for that item. For the
We're
deferral.
not talking about one now.
I know we're not.
The record reflect that Councilmember Price has changed the position. It's still a majority approval.
To defer.
It's still majority to defer.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this one yet?
Yes, we have a motion and a second.
I will not be voting for it because I would like to defer it as well.
If you'd like to make a motion to defer, you can.
There's a motion on the table.
If you'd like to make a motion to defer, you can make a motion to defer. If you would choose not to make a motion, then we'll go ahead and take a vote.
Move to defer.
Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Now we're back to the main motion.
Can we ask why?
Councilmember Price, could you share your reason for deferral?
Yes, I really wanted more information on this because there's no way that the tenant can do pre-employment physicals, post-accident physicals, drug and alcohol testing, return to work examinations for 596 full-time employees and 450 part-time employees for $14,000. So I really want to know what happens when they to whom do they refer, or is the employee allowed to go to their own physician?
Can we answer Councilmember Price's question?
I'm not sure I can answer that
I
question.
think one of the confusing things, Councilmember Price, might be that all 596 plus employees aren't going to be screened. For the pre-employment, it would be based on the number of people that we have coming to work, so based on the turnover and based on the number of accidents that we have. So this is the estimate based on the historical trend of who we have tested and the numbers going through previously.
Do we know what that was last year?
And it was the sampling that all of the ones were given so they could all kind of be given the same estimated value. The actual cost will be based on the services that are actually used during the year.
All right, here's the mayor's question. This is estimates based upon historical data.
Yes.
Do we know what these services cost us last year?
I do
Not
not
off the
know
top of
that.
our head, but yes.
I mean, we can look that up, but I don't have that.
Was it approximately $15,000?
I really don't know. I didn't look up what the total was for the year, so I don't know the answer to that.
How long will it take us to get that information?
Well, I have another comment too.
Well, let's get my question answered first. How long will it will it take us to answer the question about historical data? Other questions?
I'm just wondering if we should have another recusal on the council for this item and the last one.
Recusal?
If that's because I'm on the board, I talked to the city attorney about that at the time, and there's no financial gain or no benefit to me personally, but I'm happy to defer it, and we can talk about it when there's other council members.
I think that would be advisable.
All right, so we have let's go back. We have a motion to defer. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Any further discussion of the motion to defer? All in favor of the motion to defer, raise their hands. That passes unanimously. That item is deferred. The council who thought they were getting off light tonight by skipping out, it'll come back. Happened to me last time I took off.
Next item is approval of an amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, Section 8.8.3, types of nuisances regarding unnecessary noise. This is a first reading.
Thank you, Kay. That's correct. The noise ordinance that was passed had some some challenges in trying to present it in the court successfully due to the way some of it was written on who we can cite and not cite. So there was some changes, amendments made to this ordinance that clarifies who can be cited, whether it be a property owner or the occupants of the house, whether it would be the owner of commercial property or the management or just the commercial property's name. It can be cited so that we can cite whoever is there at the time and not have to try to find an owner that may be somewhere else located, possibly even in a different state if there are issues with noise. The other amendment is just a clarification on some of the timing that did not match up when we were talking about some of the noise that had to do with landscaping. The exemptions were from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then when it talked about when they're not allowed to make the noise, we said 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. That should have been 8 p.m. to coincide with the exemption timing. So those two corrections have been made. And this would be the first reading.
Any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. When an officer approaches a property, how do they know who the appropriate person is to cite? I mean, obviously, if the owner's there, that's one thing, but the way this is written, it says owner or occupier.
That would be,
So,
that would be for residents, that's correct. If the owner of the house or the property is not there and there's a noise issue going on, they can cite whoever is there as the occupier of the house.
Well, wouldn't they need to find whoever's responsible for?
They would.
Because there could be 10 people there. And
Certainly they would. They would narrow down to who would be the responsible party at that particular property.
There has to be a judgment call made by the citing officer.
Absolutely.
And there does have to be judgment exercised.
Correct.
Okay. And I guess the same situation with businesses. The question has been raised, how do you determine who is responsible at that particular place?
It would be the same way. Whoever the manager in charge at that business, somebody would have to be the person in charge at that time if the business is opened, and it would be given and presented to that person.
Okay, so the code enforcement officer they wouldn't just find the first person they see, they would.
No, so they go
Find out who
they
is
go
responsible
and investigate and then interview as needed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Price.
I brought this up at committee, and I know this is not what the purpose of the changing of this ordinance is, although this ordinance is relatively new. It was only passed in the late spring. But I'm still kind of hung up on the exemption. I know that was in the old ordinance as well, the exemption for the band and sports league activities sponsored by a school. But Mr. Halsey, who was our legal advisor at that committee date, indicated that anything at a school was exempt anyway, So why do we even specify an exemption if there are more entities or more instances than band and sports league activities that might also be exempt? In other words, why do we need item number 10 if we can't cite a Fulton County property?
Mr. Davidson, can you shed any light on that?
I think the reason we have that in there is because the schools are exempt when they're doing something that's school-related. So kids in the parking lot, blasting their radios, they might not be exempt. But an official football game with a band is exempt. So you can delineate between the two. An official school function or ceremony would be exempt, but, something that's on the school property not necessarily be exempt.
I mean, might we change it to something like school-sponsored activity on government property or on school property? Or do the private schools not enjoy this exemption?
The private schools do not have that exemption unless we put it in the ordinance.
They do not? Where does that say?
The reason that the school would have the exemption is sovereign immunity. They're a agency of the state, as the cases have stated throughout history. So they can exercise their sovereign immunity and be immune from our ordinances, basically. A private school, on the other hand, is not immune because they're not a branch of the state.
So does this ordinance exempt a private school? Item number 10. Under exemptions.
As it's stated, I would say yes, because we don't make a distinction between public or private school.
But there could be something at a school such as a carnival or festival or something that would not be covered by this because we've specified band and sports.
That is true.
Is this initial reading? Is it possible to change it at this time, or does it have to go through something entirely different?
This is a first reading. You can change it.
I'm sorry, it could be changed?
This is the first reading. It can be revised before the second reading. We can bring this back to committee for further discussion about amendments.
Yeah, I think we need to tighten that up or make it clear, what schools are, well, right here, it indicates all schools, or doesn't specify the type of school, but also the type of activities that might be exempt. And I'm not so sure that we don't need to have a guideline of decibels as well, given that we've had some complaints recently. And also in item B under number 4, down further on the page, we've reduced noise from landscaping and yard maintenance down to 8 p.m., which in the summer actually could be a problem. But yet there are school functions and games that last in the evenings beyond 8 p.m. I just think we need to be, more clear on this. And I know that there were some emails that went back and forth today that were also not on the same page.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Yeah, I also had a question about that, item number 10 regarding the schools. I know we had a lot of discussion when we put this together. There are certain schools that have zoning conditions. And Mr. Davidson, would a zoning condition supersede this ordinance?
Yes.
So if there's something specific to a private school that we had approved, they would have to adhere to the zoning condition
Yes.
first?
Yes.
Okay. or the more restrictive. Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Price. I would like to take a look at that and make sure we're understanding which schools that's impacting, because I think the intent originally was for public schools. But we can go back to some of our original discussion, see where that landed.
Any other questions before we have the first reading of the ordinance? Mr. Davidson, if you'd read the ordinance.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia regarding unnecessary noise. Now therefore be it ordained by the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, and is hereby ordained and established by said authority, and the Mayor and Council do hereby adopt the following ordinance. Section 8.8.3, Types of Nuisances of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell is hereby amended by deleting Section S in its entirety and substituting therefore a new subsection 8.8.3S, Noise, creating unnecessary noise, to read as follows. Text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the first reading.
Do we have a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance? Motion to approve by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DePolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the first reading of the ordinance, raise their hands. I will entertain an amendment. If you propose your amendment?
Just to ask that between now and the first reading that we address exemption number 10 and get some alternative wording for that.
Well, that wouldn't necessarily be an amendment. That would be a suggestion, and I will accept that as a recommendation to go back to committee before the next council meeting to have a full discussion of changes to this and clarifications.
Okay, I mean, maybe it's not an amendment, but in addition to the motion.
It's a clarification, just a direction, and I agree with you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? City Administrator Kay Love.
Thank you. We will not have another committee meeting before the next council meeting.
Well, can we defer this until the second meeting in December?
Yes, sir. I'd just like to get it clear for staff which meeting we're going to.
This would be going to the second meeting in December so that we'll have time to bring this to committee for a full discussion.
Thank you.
Councilmember Price.
That brings up a point. Did we defer specifically those other items to specific dates?
The other items have been deferred to the next council meeting.
Just the next council meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a motion to defer until the second meeting in December of the second reading of this ordinance, with the understanding we'll have a committee meeting in between to discuss amendments and changes to this proposed change. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time, Kay, if you'll read the calendar for community development.
Sir. RZ 2014026667, CV 2014026668, CU 2014026669, Parkside 1243 and 1247 Canton Street, Land Lot 410, Matt Dahlhauser. This item was deferred from November 10th, 2014 meeting. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you very much, Kay. This item was deferred from the December 10th. This application is requesting a rezoning from OR with a conditional use to allow for stacked flats. There is one variance being requested. This is an area of the subject property that has 2 existing homes on it. There's a common driveway between the property to the south and the southern property. They use that as a common access to the rear of the property. This is the location on Canton, just between Woodstock and Manhattan. It is currently zoned OP. The applicant is requesting the OR designation with a conditional use. This was the original approval that council saw at their prior meeting, showing the office, 8 stacked flats and 6 townhomes. The applicant has provided an additional drawing showing the outdoor amenity space. The portion of the property to the north, which is being identified as an easement, which the applicant will control, will be included in the outdoor amenity space. This gets them to the over 20% requirement designation of the outdoor amenity space. There is one reduction in the rear setback from the 20-foot requirement to the 10-foot requirement. Planning Commission reviewed this application, recommended denial. Planning staff recommended approval with 3 conditions. If you have any questions.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Diamond.
Brad, can you remind me, the setback variance is from 20 to 10, but the rear buffer, is that still the D buffer?
The 40-foot buffer is being shown,
Okay.
but the additional 20 feet is required after the buffer, so it would end up totally being 60. They're providing a 50-foot setback from that rear. The 40 is being shown, and they're only requesting 10 along the eastern property line.
And what did we decide about the fence? Is there a fence?
The fence is actually going on the property line.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Price.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend, could you point out the location of the 3 specimen trees? There's supposed to be 3 specimen trees on the property, and I really couldn't tell from the tree rendering exactly which one, where they are.
The 3 specimen trees that are being impacted, there's one in this location here. There's one adjacent in this location. There's one here and one here. They are the main parts of the tree are not on the property that's being developed, but since they are impacting more than 50% of the critical root zone, that's why they're being identified.
Okay, I thought I read something that there were 3 trees on the property to be removed. Is that, did I misread that?
Well, there's numerous trees to be removed.
No, specimen trees.
Specimen trees. There's a large oak in this location. Second one back here.
Are these to be removed?
Yes.
Okay.
Looking for the third.
And the one right, I think there's one right at the road.
Yeah, this one. There's one right up here.
And does it go?
Yes,
And that's because of the setback.
correct.
So we consider that in the buildable area.
Right.
And are there any other specimen trees that would be removed that are not in the buildable area?
No, I don't believe so.
And is the buildable area considered anything that's within a setback regardless of whether we're actually building something there?
Well, I mean, at least for the particular front one, the tree would be right on where this building would be going. And it would be, to build that building in that location, you would have to remove more than 50% of the critical root zone.
Now, there appears to be one sort of towards the back that's, I guess, where the driveway would be.
Back here?
Yeah, it's closer to the, it's kind of on the edge of the abutting 2 properties, like where the 2 parcels were put together. It's right on that junction.
In this location?
Yeah, in a little bit. Yeah, like right about there, or a little bit further. So, I mean, I guess technically it's in the buildable area, but they're technically not building there.
But that area is the driveway to access the garages for the units.
Right. Is that considered buildable area?
Yes.
Okay. And then there were some questions Planning Commission had that I just wondered if were answered. Discussing the stormwater runoff. Is that anything that we address at this point, or does that come later?
That comes at the land disturbance permit.
So we don't have to be concerned with that. We just assume that it's workable.
They have to engineer to make it work correct.
Okay, there was one other thing. Oh, there was an issue, a design review board. Does it come back to design review board again?
Yes.
It does, okay.
Yeah. And
So their issues with the height, et cetera, will all be addressed at that time?
Correct.
Okay, and there was also a question there about hardship, but that's not an issue for them, that's an issue for planning and us.
Correct.
And what is the hardship again? Or what are our do we have standards of review here that we have to meet?
Related to the variances, correct.
And is there a hardship?
That will be discussed by the applicant, but at the time when this was being reviewed by Design Review Board, the project was completely different in orientation and changed, so I think they would probably have to look at it differently and whether that would still be applicable.
Yeah, it's hard to tell from planning what exactly their issues were, and given the new rendering, would they approve it at this point or not? And I know we discussed maybe sending it back to them, which would have put a whole hitch in the process, I understand that, but
Right.
I'm still curious what Planning Commission would say regarding the most current plan. But we just won't know, is that basically it? So we don't get their advice.
You received their recommendation on the plan that was in front of them. It's correct. They did not review this document and the changes that have taken place since then.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend, I added up the square footage amounts listed on the sheet you gave us for the amenity space, and I came up with a different number than the total. And can you explain the discrepancy there?
The portion of the outdoor amenity space in this location, about 1,450 square feet, was not included in the actual total.
Okay, so the 3580, I believe it is, that's listed in that, just south, yeah, right?
Correct.
Right there.
Right.
So that 3580 includes
Just represents what's on their property.
on-site, it doesn't include that addition.
Correct.
Okay,
That was explained to me by the applicant this afternoon.
okay. It looks proportionately correct, that it should be that way, so, but I was adding up numbers and I wasn't coming up to the same thing. With respect to that additional space, can you explain what's gonna happen on that space as far as easements, what they're using it for, what it's gonna look like?
I'll have the applicant explain to you.
Okay. Then another question on that specifically, a portion of that is a drainage facility, which is a head wall, and then there's a depression there that collects the water from, as it comes out of that head wall. Is a drainage facility permitted within our amenity space?
Current language is silent. So it's up for interpretation.
Well, I don't have the language in front of me. Does it say what can be included, or does it say what's excluded?
There's no exclusion and there's no inclusion, one way or the other.
What is it? It's the definition for amenity space?
Outdoor amenity space in general, where required, outdoor amenity space must provide on a lot and must be available as an unenclosed exterior space appropriately improved for pedestrian activity or for aesthetic appeal and cannot include use for vehicles except for incidental service, maintenance, or emergency action only.
So, Mr. Davidson, what's your interpretation of whether we can include a drainage facility in that?
As long as he makes it pretty, I guess he can include it
As long as it's pretty, okay.
for aesthetic purposes, so.
Okay, so that would obviously not be a pedestrian thing, but as long as it's attractive and planted, so forth,
Correct.
it would work, okay. Which kind of leads to my next question. Assuming this area is cleaned up, how do we make sure that the allocation of this space remains with this property? Because my understanding is it's going to be an easement, is that correct? It's not going to actually be purchased. So we don't want the adjacent property owner to come back and say, I have this green space, when it's really actually being included on the adjacent property. So my question is, how do we make sure that future councils understand that allocation?
That'll be up to your crack staff in the Community Development Department.
Does our GPS give us? We can put this on the GIS map which becomes part of our permanent records, and it'll show that there's an easement there and what the easement is for.
Yes.
So somebody has to look at that map, but yes.
All right, and, there's a possibility that the adjoining parcel may come in and not need rezoning, so it won't come in from front of us again. And whoever's working on that plan at the time may not know about this, so we need to make sure we have a mechanism in place. It sounds like we will with putting it on GIS.
If granted approval to use that piece of property or area as an easement, staff would recommend a condition that relates to it, that the easement be recorded in such a way that it can then be followed through the title search of that piece of property.
And I agree with that, but again, if somebody comes in on the adjoining property and they don't need approval that would require the title being reviewed, how would staff know that there's an item there?
For them to have it, if they redevelop that piece of property, they bring to us a survey that shows the encumbrances that say, here's where the drainage goes, here's where the structures and the pipes, and here's where the right-of-way is located. And they would, it's not gonna change setbacks because the property line is not going to change, but we're gonna be able to say, you can't put a building on top of it, or you can't put parking on top of it, because it's got an easement that's encumbered it for amenity space.
So we could recommend that an easement be recorded and just leave it up to staff to decide the language to sufficiently flag that.
I would identify it as a outdoor amenity space as part of this approval, the rezoning number such and such that then gets recorded against that piece of property. Make sure that that easement is recorded prior to an issuance of a building permit or something of that nature.
So you're suggesting this be made a condition of zoning?
Right.
It's not currently a condition y'all recommended?
Right.
And the last piece related to that has to do with the maintenance of it. I guess, could that be part of the easement that gets recorded, Mr. Davidson?
You can make that a condition, yes. he's claiming control over that property in order to meet the requirements, then you can do that.
So we could require in a condition that the easement has maintenance language in it?
Like we do with stormwater detention ponds and stuff in neighborhoods now.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? This time we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Matt Dahlhauser, and I'm here representing the Parkside Development. During our last couple of meetings, we discussed, I guess, the outdoor amenity space areas and some other clarifications on the plan. Since then, we've been able to go back and kind of revise the plan to make sure we meet the requirements per your recommendations. We're still requesting the mixed-use building up front with commercial space below, 8 condo flats above, as well as 6 townhomes in the rear. Since the last meeting, I guess there was a question about if rooftop decks are allowed to be open space amenities area. Since that meeting, we've been able to show that we meet the requirement on ground level and don't actually need the rooftop decks. So we hope that is clarified a little bit. But we do request approval tonight based on our rear setback from 20 to 10 and our conditional use on our stacked flats up in the front.
Anything else to present?
That's it.
Does the council have any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. You'll have an opportunity for rebuttal. Councilmember Dippolito.
Thank you. Dahlhauser, first of all, I want to thank you for your patience. You have made a lot of changes over the months, and we appreciate you working with everyone to try to get this to a point where everyone's comfortable with it. I'm looking at your rendering on the screen here. Could you describe in the rear portion where you have the 40-foot buffer? I think that's pretty clear. And then there's the 10-foot setback. Could you just explain how all that works and what's private, what's public, and so forth?
Well, the rear of the property, there's going to be a decorative fence per what the UDC Type C buffer requires, even though this is a Type D buffer with the 40-foot landscape buffer. There's a 10-foot setback from there, which is going to be, there's going to be some sort of retaining walls as it steps down because of the site and the topos of the site. But that'll be the main entrances into these 3 townhomes. And the garages will be on the back side with the courtyard.
So there's a 10-foot wide between, within that 10-foot zone, I guess, there's sidewalks, and you said there might be a retaining wall at the edge of it?
Well, currently, right here, the site kind of steps down this way. So it's going to have to, there's a couple steps here, steps there, and steps there. Then it comes back. There's a few steps that actually go down on the side of the units as well. The high side of the site's kind of currently right here.
All right, Mr. Townsend, quick question for you. Are retaining walls allowed within setbacks?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
This is north?
Flip it.
Oh, turn it.
Another question for you on, that answers my question there, thank you. On this easement area, could you describe what's going to be happening there and what you envision there?
Yeah, currently it's it's kind of a swell area. It's not a detention pond, there is a main pipe that we have a cross easement with, the Q-Care to the south. It comes into a 36-inch, or comes from a 36-inch, comes into this little swell area that's not designed for detention, and comes out to an outlet structure going underneath the property to the north sidewalks, or not sidewalks, but parking lot. What we intend is to take everything, make it more aesthetically appealing, actually go below grade to improve that entire area. And I've got a couple pictures I can give to you guys that kind of shows you exactly what's there currently. It's kudzu, it's a lot of things you don't want kind of in a nice development. So it makes sense for our property as well as the property to the north to kind of come together and make an area for both parcels to enjoy. I can kind of show that.
You can put them on the overhead if you like.
They're kind of dark, so I don't know how.
No,
Yeah, it's not going to show up.
Thank you. I think to make sure that this area is adequately maintained, I, for one, would like to see some sort of a recorded easement. Would you have any concerns over that?
Not at all, and I don't know if you want to give me that as well. This is a document that we already have signed that kind of talks about the easement, the maintenance of this property from the property owner to the north. So we're on board, and we've already discussed that with the property owner to have a perpetual easement to allow for us to maintain it and for both parties to enjoy it.
Is there going to be any sort of a fence around it, or is it just going to be open?
It's going to be open, yeah.
Okay. On some of the original plans, you were showing detention and water quality in the area directly behind your front building. Is that going to be underground detention?
Yeah. Well, originally, part of it was already going to be underground, and then the quality structure part of it was actually going to be open air. But since we're trying to gain more, I guess, surface area, I guess you would call it, we took everything below grade and actually going to improve the property that we have an easement on to allow for a large area for everyone to enjoy.
Okay, so this will be landscaped grass?
It will,
kind of area.
yes,
Okay,
and maintained by us.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Oh, Councilmember Price.
At the front building, closest to Canton or Crabapple, and the connection to the parking lot at the adjacent parcel, is that, could a car drive all the way through there?
Yes, it's a one-way from our property that goes out underneath and circles in the other parking lot.
Okay, so it's an exit only in that direction.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what's the advantage of that?
Connectivity from both parcels.
So it's a single lane?
It is single lane, and there's parking under there as well.
I mean, it's a one-way driveway, basically. Okay, and then it comes out the other end. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, I have noticed in our conditions, there isn't a condition about the parking, and I believe you're going to be sharing some parking next door, is that correct?
Well, currently, we're one parking space short on the plan. If you see how we've kind of, our office got a little bit smaller based on some architectural layouts. So all in all, we're one parking short, but we are going to get some shared parking access from the property to the north as well.
Okay, but you're close enough, I guess. Mr. Townsend, can he get an administrative variance for that one parking space? Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Did anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Seeing no hands up, public hearing is closed. Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a will, and I hate to defer this again, but I know that Councilmember Wynn has been the most active, given that this is in her department, as far as, you know, what motions she might make, and I don't know if she's left any instructions or discussed that with anybody, but I haven't talked to her today, and I don't know what she might have done had she been able to be here. And also, we've got, you know, several missing applicants, and this has been a rather contentious application. I feel a little reluctant to move ahead, but I feel like it's getting, you know, closer to what we'd like to see. I just hate to miss something that somebody else might have brought up. So I'm not going to make a motion to defer, but I'd be interested in hearing how my fellow council members feel.
Councilmember Diamond, have you had an opportunity to speak with Councilmember Wynn?
Yes, sir. At the legal meeting last week, we talked some about this, and she was very disappointed that she was planning to be here because she felt like you guys had really come through the whole process and were probably qualified for one of our board or commissions or staff by now. You know, there was obviously a number of revisions since the Planning Commission started this, and I think there were a lot of comments on what a challenging infill piece this is. It's so tiny and with a stream buffer going through the middle. But the fact that you've done the interconnectivity and you've changed the size, and you know, when I look at the Planning Commission minutes and they talk about reducing the size of the units and creating that flow and the intent of the live-work community and mixed use that we're trying to achieve in that area, I think that really hits all that. And the fact that you've eliminated virtually all the variances, but save for one, which is still giving us a stronger buffer than I think we were going to have under the existing zoning. So I am comfortable with it. And I appreciate all you've done for this. So I guess I would let Councilmember DiPolito, I would defer to him on how you would want the easement recorded, but otherwise I'm comfortable with it.
Motion. Councilmember DiPolito.
Yeah, I think this plan has come a long way, and it's certainly radically different than it came in, and I think that's for the better. So I think it does meet a lot of the criteria that we have, and there's some challenges to the site, not the least of which is the trucks coming in for Q-Care. I think that's something that's not really discussed because it doesn't necessarily show up as a variance or something of that nature, but that's a challenge to try to deal with that and make that all work. So I think you've done a very good job of handling all of the various issues and all the challenges of this site. So I'm comfortable with moving forward on it.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Price.
Given that there's a lot of impervious surface, and I never thought I would complain about that, but it just is a, you know, from the bird's eye view, there's not much green. I know it's the amount that we require, but there's a lot of you know, driveway type portions to this. Is there any consideration being given to a different type of surface for that, or what is the surface proposed for the parking areas and or driveways?
Let me ask this question first. Are we going to be looking at the drainage and the pervious surface as after the approval under the engineering phase?
The surface determination will be part of the land disturbance permit. I know they have discussed, you know, pavement where the water would go through in particular locations, but that will also be determined with the calculations on how much they have to retain and how it has to, you know, the water go through to the detention areas.
So I guess my question really is that something we should or should not condition to at this point, or how might that be?
It really depends on how the engineering of it comes out.
But there would be no direction that they would be required to.
The direction would be meet the requirements of the code.
And how how do you see this as it is presented to us, that the code, what would the code require for that driveway?
I think the surface can really depend on how much water they want to be able to retain, how they deal with their water quality issues, how they deal with, the bioretention and the landscaping areas that they're proposing.
There's a significant amount of engineering that needs to be done for water control on this site. We have, as a practice, we don't require that engineering before we let them know whether they can build on the property, because it's quite expensive.
Correct.
But there's nothing that would prevent it from all being asphalt.
Correct.
So it could end up being just all asphalt.
22% of it is common amenity space, which is green.
Right, but I mean-
Another 4,000 square feet is the rear buffer, which is green. The rest of it is buildings and asphalt, correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion before we entertain a motion? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve a resolution recommending that the City of Roswell Mayor and City Council grant approval of the requested zoning with a conditional use and concurrent variance to office residential to allow for office stack flats and townhouses per case number RZ 201402667 and conditional variance 201402668 and conditional use 201402669 located at 1243 and 1247 Canton Street with the conditions recommended by staff and with 2 additional conditions. The first being that the easement area to the north be designed as a landscaped area subject to DRB approval. That would be condition number 4, and a condition number 5, that there be a recorded permanent easement for the easement area to the north that will identify the use of the property as amenity space and will provide for the continual maintenance of that easement area by the applicant's property owners, future owners. Responsible party. Thank you. That's my motion.
We have a motion for approval by Councilmember DiPolito with 2 additional conditions. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
So the 1, 2, and 3 are the staff recommended conditions,
Correct?
and so the reduction of the rear setbacks 20 to 10.
Correct?
Okay.
All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Next item is RZ 201400970 and CV 201400974, 110 Woodstock, Lehigh Homes. Mr. Townsend.
This application is a rezoning with concurrent variances, which is being applied for and brought through by city staff in conjunction with the public hearing notices that were mailed out the first time around for this notice. This is for 110 Woodstock, located next to the cemetery, the parking lot on Woodstock Road. This is the location. This is the approved last site plan for the 20 townhomes for the location. Staff would recommend approval of this rezoning as it was approved on the September 10th, 2014. I got a typo there. Date, sorry.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Mr. Townsend, just for clarification, there are no changes from the September 10th.
No.
Thank you.
Councilmember Price.
Again, for clarification, this went back through the entire process again?
Yes. Neighborhood meeting, planning commission, to mayor and council.
And are there any minutes of the planning commission? I don't see them.
The minutes weren't done to be able to put in your packet. It was actually done in November. It went to the November meeting.
Okay, so they just weren't ready. Do you have them?
No, I don't think I've gotten them yet. Yeah, they were at the planning commission last Tuesday.
Okay,
They recommended approval.
okay, and they had nothing
Nothing,
changed
with no changes.
from before? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. At this time, we'll hear from the applicant.
The applicant is the city.
So anything, do we have,
The
are we ready
property,
for the public hearing now?
property owner's here, but you can hear from the public, yes.
Let's hear from the property owner first. 10-foot setback here.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Brendan Walsh, 120 Thompson Place, Roswell. I'll follow up with what Brad said in a respect of your guys' time and the public's time here as well. This project is being brought back through the process. We have not made any changes to what we brought through previously. We feel what we've designed and shown the first time through is the best design for this piece of property. We're back here because of a notification issue and to let the public speak. So at this time, I'll turn it over to the public to get their opinion on the project. Thank you.
If you have any questions or comments, come forward. Yes, sir. You'll give us your name and address, please. You've got 5 minutes.
It's Eric Schumacher, 145 Prospect Street. Thank you very much for following our ordinances and putting this back through the process. I know it was a hardship for the applicant, and I'm sorry for that. I do hope that in the future, when somebody from the public here in Roswell speaks and outlines a problem, that we address that quickly. I'd like to have a copy, actually, of what we're looking to sign tonight. I didn't see one on the back table. The resolution with the...
Mr. Townsend?
Thank you. So I had a question, actually, about one of the items that came in after the public discussion at the last session, which was the applicant will add a stub out for a trail in the future on the northeastern side of the property. I don't really know what that means. Does that mean that we're going to have a public easement across the applicant's property to come to the property line with another piece of private property? Or I'm not sure what this means. I'd like some clarification on what this means. I don't think it would be right to ask this applicant to have a public easement on their property to stub out to a piece of private property that's currently a cemetery. That cemetery currently has potentially some issues of a private nuisance, potentially a public nuisance. I've worked with the city attorney on trying to mitigate some of that in the past. That included erecting a fence around the cemetery. So I'd like to know what that means.
It means there'll be a potential for public use in the future because there will be a trail that leads to the edge of the property. It does not mean currently use, but it's potential use in the future.
Yeah, but so what does stub out mean? Are you asking an easement on this
It means there will be a
property?
trail that goes to the edge of the property.
So you're asking for a public easement across the private property of the applicant?
Mr. Townsend, if this is approved with this site plan, will the trail go to the edge of the property?
I believe the intent of the condition was, if you look at the graphic, this is a connection to the parking lot, to the park. You see this walkway, how it goes around the detention pond. I believe there was some desire to have it connect to the property line. So if there was a connection for a pathway somewhere in this area, that the public wanted to go through the cemetery and not have to come out to Woodstock or up to the other road to get to the park. I believe that we're looking for that type of access.
So I'd like either clarification that you're asking for a public easement on this property for connectivity to a private piece of property, which is the cemetery, or eliminate this item from the list.
I would like to see the stub out included.
Okay, so I think that we should just clarify and ask for a public easement across the applicant's property.
You may wish to ask him for that. All I'm asking for is this trail go to the edge of the property.
Okay, because I don't want to believe that the city is asking and suggesting that the applicant and members of the public here start creating easements over the cemetery without proper authority, right? So it's currently
We would not do
private property.
something without proper authority.
Sorry?
I hope we don't do things without proper authority. And there's
So
no
like the
intention
path
of
that
doing
currently exists on the cemetery. The path that the city created in the current cemetery was done without permission. It's private property.
I couldn't tell you that because
Okay.
I have not researched when it was done or how it was done.
Okay.
So to conclude it was done without permission would be an assumption. It would be an assumption not based upon facts which I've heard.
Okay.
So if you have some facts to bring forward based upon personal knowledge,
It's in the 2008 cemetery assessment report prepared by the Jaeger Corporation.
But I don't think
That's
it has
not in
anything to do
evidence.
with this application.
I'm just
it's
just
just
responding
not
to you.
before us tonight.
Okay. Second, there's an item on here that says the applicant will consider a type of fencing along the eastern side of the property abutting the cemetery. What does that mean? Does that mean you're just suggesting they look at it, or are you requiring a fence? I don't understand why that needs to be in the legal document if you're not asking them to actually do it.
What is are there any conditions of placing a fence on this property along the boundary line?
There was some discussion related to the applicant not wanting to have a barrier between the cemetery and the construction of the townhomes. He felt that the utilization of the open space of the cemetery was an amenity and didn't want it fenced in. So there was a discussion that there needs to be some public barrier between the property and the cemetery to control the demarcation of that line of, who controls what. So we did not want a wooden fence, so we asked them to consider some other material that might be more appropriate.
Does the property owner have a suggestion? Height,
4 feet.
4 to 5 feet, but it would be something appropriate for a cemetery that would be suitable, that would have been seen perhaps historically accurate. So that could be either a wrought iron or a split rail fence or a picket fence.
That's great, that's great. Are we including that as something that needs to happen, or is it
Council can
suggested?
choose to do that.
Sorry.
The council can make that a condition if they wish.
So it's currently written that the applicant will consider, or they are doing it?
I'm not, will consider, I don't think, if the council wishes to make a condition, they can. I'm not sure how it reads right now.
How about this? I'd like to please
Motion
ask the
hasn't been
council.
made.
I'd like to please ask the council to consider making this a requirement, because at this time, the cemetery is actually a bit of a private nuisance. There is nobody controlling anybody's presence on that cemetery at any point at night. It would be hard to police. So allowing ingress, egress is also potentially a safety issue for the applicants themselves. And it looks like they're willing to do so. And thank you very much if you are willing to do so. Make a requirement for a fence along that property line. And then one last thing. I understand that the applicant needs to provide disclosures
City's
for.
the applicant.
Go ahead with your question.
I understand that the city needs to provide disclosure for campaign financing. So I know at least one person here tonight has received campaign financing from the property
I haven't
owner.
received any.
I just was curious if they're willing to volunteer that information tonight.
I haven't received
Thank
any
you.
campaign financing.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak? Come forward, please.
Janet Russell, 260 Willow Springs Drive. I know you're not going to care what I say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I understand that we have now got the equivalent of Rommel and his Panzer tanks rolling through this part of Roswell to destroy anything that used to be Roswell, because Roswell was so desirable that now we need to change it. I am very concerned about how many units are on that property and the condition of Woodstock Road between Highway 9 and where the water towers are, basically the soccer fields. If anyone has to get off, you know I'm all about transit, and I see this city from a transit viewpoint. There is a bus stop where that new building, where that old building used to be Dick Blick Art. There's a bus stop there, or close by. Anyone who gets off there and has to cross to walk up Woodstock Road, because you're all trying to create this walkable, livable village. The problem is, within walking distance is not the same as walkable. Walkable is really just the shortened form of walkable, and no one is able to walk on Woodstock Road. Barely can 2 cars fit on Woodstock Road. So I'm very concerned about the pedestrian aspect of Woodstock Road from 9 going east or westward or north or whatever it's going toward Canton Street. You're now going to put in all these houses and condos and offices and live work, the new buzzword. It's not new to me. I've been preaching it for 40 years. The problem is you forgot about the part of walkable. You have some very old trees on Woodstock Road that are on the cemetery property. I make it a point of never, when the red light is down at Highway 9 and you're trying to go out to 9, to never stop when the traffic backs up under those trees. Because if you recall the woman that was killed with her child in Virginia Highlands a few years ago, because she was parked under one of those types of old trees and the branch broke off and killed her, crushed her car and killed her and her son. So I always tell people, when you're on Woodstock Road, don't ever just get right up to the car in front of you if it means you're going to be under those trees. So I think you need to rethink this whole thing. That path through the cemetery, I've seen people walking on it. It's kind of sketchy. However, I don't see how you're going to provide people access from Highway 9 and MARTA Transit to all of these condominiums and all of these, quote, restaurants and shops. And remember, I was at that affordable housing little meeting you had last week when they talked about no affordable housing for the people that work in your restaurants and shops. They take transit, but they can't walk there. I challenge any of you to walk on Woodstock Road tonight. Get off a bus and walk there. You will pray that you make it home. Pray, because it is a very dangerous place. I don't even think there's curbs. I think it's the old stone sidings like I have down where I live. So I think you're, you know, in this rush, like Rommel going through North Africa with Panzer tanks, what you're trying to do is destroy to recreate, and you're recreating a real problem.
For those who wish to get from Canton Street down Woodstock Street to Dick Blick, or what used to be Dick Blick, I encourage you to take a nice walk through the cemetery. When the high school was at the old Roswell High, the high school ran the sidewalk through the cemetery. And I've ridden my skinny tired bike on it, I've walked on it, and I found it a pleasant way to get between the two. There is a problem on Woodstock Street. There are cemeteries, it's a 150-year-old cemetery, and there are gravestones on either side of the road, and it cannot be expanded. There's no room for a sidewalk. But I do believe the walk through the cemetery is even more pleasant than a walk down the sidewalk. Anyone else wish to speak?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Chipper Gronholm, 4951 Laurel Springs Drive, Roswell, Georgia, 3075. I just want to let you know I own a small little townhome that's adjoining this, and I just, if the applicant can, you know, they have worked really hard with our Little Homeowners Association to handle the runoff, and actually have set in place, you know, an agreement, and the neighbors are happy that this is going to happen. I think it's a good thing for Roswell. Really local, walking to the Canton Street, and I think there's going to be a lot of walking involved in this. There's going to be people that come and live in our town and, you know, contribute to this great town. So I think it's a great development, and these folks have done some really good things on Canton Street, and I think that the council needs to approve it.
Any further discussion but from council before we entertain a vote? Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, and before I do, I would like to comment on the cemetery. It's actually quite a nice cemetery. Councilmember Price and I were out there just before Veterans Day putting flags out with the Roswell Historical Society, and really had an opportunity to spend some time seeing who was there and learning a little bit about the history of Roswell. So if you have a chance to go out there, I'd highly recommend it. That being said, I'd make a motion to approve a resolution recommending that the City of Roswell Mayor and City Council grant approval of the requested rezoning and the concurrent variances to the civic buffer regarding case number RZ 201-4009-970 and conditional variance 201-400-974, located at 110 Woodstock Road, with the conditions presented by staff.
How do you feel about clarifying the fence? Did we clear that up?
Well, I think the discussion with that was for the applicant to go back to the DRB when they have this approved and work that out, because at the time, they did not have a full plan laid out to how to address
So
that.
the fence will be subject to DRB approval. Is that correct, staff?
Yes.
Good enough. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Further discussion. Councilmember Price.
I just wanted to clarify that number 3, so that will read something like, the applicant will erect a fence subject to approval of DRB.
Yes. We'll make sure DRB sees the fence.
Yeah, I think well, I didn't want to change the prior approval, but it does need to go back to DRB, does it not?
Yeah.
Just by virtue of process?
Correct.
Any further discussion?
Well, so we're approving the previous motion without changes, is that it? Or are we able to modify it?
You can make an amendment to the motion in the second. You can propose an amendment.
Okay, my amendment is then to modify condition number 3 to say that the applicant will erect a fence subject to DRB approval along the eastern side of the property abutting the cemetery.
Is there a second? Councilmember Dippolito.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with the discussion of a fence, but I don't want to absolutely require them to have a fence, because I think there are landscape treatments that can be put there. And when we approved this originally, the idea was for them to look at potentially a fence or potentially some landscaping. So I'm okay with modifying it to add it goes to DRB, but I think there needs to be some flexibility whether that is truly a fence or it's a combination of fence and landscaping.
So I take that as you're not seconding the motion.
Well, then there's
I guess I'm
nothing.
attempting to modify the amendment.
I'm not sure I've gotten a modification. Councilmember Price, are you willing to modify your motion to get a second?
Yes, be happy to. The applicant will erect a fence or landscaping subject to DRB approval along the eastern side of the property.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further motion? Any further amendments? All right, we're voting on the amendment first, and that is to add to condition number 3 that there'll be landscaping or a fence as approved by the DRB constructed or planted. All in favor of that motion, raise your hands. Unanimous. All right, with that amendment, all in favor of the main motion? Councilmember Price, unanimous. Motion approved.
Next item is final plat, Burkdale at Crabapple Phase 1. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you. This is acceptance of the final plat for Burkdale at Crabapple Phase 1, which consists of 16 lots. This was broken into phases once road construction was delayed to address unsuitable subsurface conditions. This is the entire project. This is the road that has since been completed. At the time, the decision was made to break it into phases. Phase 1 is 16 lots at the north along Rucker Road. And this is acceptance of that final plat.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Diamond.
So since the road is complete, why are we phasing it?
The second phase will be coming in the next couple weeks. They just haven't prepared that application for final plat.
So this first part does not include the amenity space?
Correct.
All right.
The applicant's here if you have any questions for him, but that's, they're planning in the next couple weeks to apply.
Okay.
Councilmember Depolito.
Thank you. I guess as a follow-up to Councilmember Diamond's question, I guess I have concern about approving a first phase when some of the key components of this, stormwater detention being one of them, and the amenity package is not being completed as part of that first phase. So I guess I would like to understand how that's going to work, first of all, and I guess we can hear that from the applicant. But secondly, as far as if we approve the plat, can we withhold a CO on any of the houses until such time as the balance of the plat is completed?
The balance meaning the second phase? Or the?
Well, I'm assuming yes, if the rest of it's the second phase.
They would be able to pull a CO on the first phase prior to the second phase being completed.
They would?
Yes.
Unless we said they are not allowed to, in which case it's sort of a partial approval. Right. So my goal is I want to make sure that the city's protected, that the improvements, the required improvements are in place.
Right. The stormwater pond is
But at the same time, we want to give the builder some flexibility, understanding that they've had delays on a portion of the site. I understand that. So trying to find a happy medium there where we can make sure we have adequate protections, that the balance of the property is developed per the plan. Right. But let them get started on what they need to. So if you have a recommendation for that, I'd like to hear it, or maybe the applicant does.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Ted Turner, Pulte Homes, 2475 North Winds Parkway, Alpharetta. Yes, this is the first 16 lots of the 44 unit development. We were able to get the first part of this, this first 16 lots paved. And the stormwater detention facility is certified for volume and performance. It's fully functioning, and water and sewer has been signed off by Fulton County Water and Sewer. We do have 4 models under construction that we in the first phase, a couple of which will we expect to see obtain a CO in on or about December 15th. So we will need this final plat for a CO. We have a very extensive lead bank in this community, over a couple of hundred. We opened for sale last week and have already wrote 4. We anticipate writing 2 more, and actually we've written contracts in both phases. The one we expect to plat and the one that will come in just the next 3 to 4 weeks. The only reason why we're not platting the whole thing is we're finishing the road out to house. The amenity area that Councilman Diamond was talking about, it's really a passive amenity area. We're going to landscape it, but there's really no pool or tennis or any of that in this community. So, you know, Pulte Homes has never walked away from a development. I think our reputation precedes us, and we are committed to finishing the project. And like I say, we have sign-ups really in both phases. So, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
This is a question for staff, and maybe you can help them. Do we show a sidewalk on Rucker Road on this side of the street?
The Rucker Road design, Transportation Department took funds in lieu of the actual construction of the sidewalk on the south side of the road because the design wasn't determined how it would actually, that future road would be. There are some utility poles in that location which would have to be relocated. So for this project as well as for the subdivision to the north, Transportation took funds in lieu of the actual placement of the sidewalk in that place.
Can Transportation tell me what their plans are for a sidewalk on this side of the road?
I can't believe that they can because I don't believe it's been designed.
No, do we intend to put a sidewalk on this side of the road at some future time? Mr. Asenbach, if you'll come forward and enlighten us.
I tried, Steve.
So where are we as far as planning a sidewalk on this side of the road?
We're in initial planning. Alpharetta, we share Rucker Road with Alpharetta. Alpharetta has a plan to, glad Councilman Eagerhart isn't here to use the W word, they are going to widen the road into 3 lanes. And so we are using their cross-section as a model template for ours. So I've got staff, our 2 staffs are working together to sort of figure out what Alpharetta intends to do, and they're quite a bit farther along than we are, but they intend to do a cross-section, and we intend to match that cross-section. We are not far enough along to explain to the applicant where they would need to go, but we have intentions to do that.
So in lieu of building a sidewalk and tearing it up.
Correct.
We have made the wise choice to set aside some money and take on the responsibility ourselves.
Yes, sir.
When this.
So it will have
when
curb
when
and
the
gutter
road is-
sidewalks. We just don't know where they'll be and how that's going to work out. There's some questions about how it's going to tie into the existing
You have answered my
intersection.
questions. I was just curious. Normally, we require the sidewalks to come in, and
Yes, sir.
appreciate your letting us know, and I agree with your strategy. Any other questions? Councilmember Price.
I'm trying to figure out why this is coming up right now, because we went through this like close to a year ago. Why is it, have there been changes since the original site plan?
You approved the rezoning, preliminary plat has been issued, the land disturbance permit has been issued, they're constructing all the infrastructure. The final plat comes to you because you have to accept.
We are accepting a
right-of-way.
dedication of this road in essence.
Dedication of right-of-way.
This is accepting this road is complete.
Correct.
Accepting the road as complete.
In phase 1.
Once we accept this, we accept ongoing maintenance for this road. It becomes a public street. It's not currently a public street.
Okay, it's just that's not what the summary of the item says, so I was sort of confused as to why we were getting it.
Well, we haven't seen a lot of new subdivision streets, so it's fairly new to us as far as a practice, but
Haven't seen a lot of final plats. that's for
but
sure.
15 years ago, we were much more, had much more expertise in
Robust
accepting, a much more robust system, so you'll see more of these.
Oh, can't wait. Okay,
All final plats come to council for them to be accepted for the public dedication. The mayor gets to put his name on the Mylar.
great, thank you very much.
Councilmember Diamond.
So does this, did this go to planning commission?
No, the preliminary plats go to planning commission. They see it before that.
Okay.
You review final plats for dedication of the public rights of way.
I guess my concern is 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we had a lot of neighborhoods whose amenities didn't get done. And I realize it's a very small piece here, and I can't imagine you guys spent all that money on that road to not build on that, and I get that. I guess I would just be more comfortable with some kind of something tied to the CO, so we're not just giving up. You know, we started out the conversation with a couple of weeks. It would be coming in a couple of weeks, which could give us December 8th. We're here in a couple of weeks. But, and that would give you time to close on the 15th, but then I'm here in 3 or 4 weeks, so.
Yeah, they haven't applied yet for the final plat. I think they're expecting maybe in the next week or two that they'll have the application in. It'll be maybe a month process once they apply for final plat for it to get to this stage.
You can condition any number of homes. I mean, they've got 4 models. If you think they shouldn't get any more than 6 additional COs, I mean, realistically, the COs are gonna take 6 months. I mean, let's take it, they could build the house in 4 months to get CO. They should have the other phase plat in here in front of you, definitely before that should take place.
So how many houses are we looking at that would need COs in this calendar year? Okay, I can live with 2.
Do two in the models. Let them CO the models, but actually, I don't think they CO the models. Do they CO the models? Certificate of completion. I think that's what they do with the models.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As an alternative, would it be preferable to put up a bond or a letter of credit for the remaining improvements as opposed to tying COs? That's really a question for the applicant. I think as long as we make sure that there's something here to make sure the balance is completed.
What is the current status of construction of the balance?
We're paving the balance of it right now.
So
There's
grading's
rock
done,
down.
utilities are in, the curbs
Yes,
are in,
everything's in.
and all and you just need to, and the base is in.
Yes, sir, base is in.
So
As soon as it dries up, we hope to pave it later this week.
To put the asphalt in.
Yes, sir.
I guess my point to the council is they're 95% finished.
And we have a sizable investment out there. We're not going anywhere. It's a timing thing, that's all.
Any other questions? Councilmember Price.
Just to clarify again, everything in phase 1, the site plan is identical to what we saw
Yes.
months ago?
Yes.
Same number of houses in phase 1?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments regarding this approval?
Isn't a public hearing, but.
I'm giving them one. This is, we've sort of opened this thing up.
Opened it up. That's fine.
There's been a lot of discussion and maybe some confusion. All right, any further discussion by council? Councilmember Depolito.
Clarification, there are 4 models and 2 additional homes currently under construction, is that correct?
No, there are 4 models under construction, and that's it right now.
Okay, so if we said this is approved and with a maximum of 4 COs until the final plat for the balance, that would get you through the time period you need.
It would. We would prefer not to have it that way.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? We have a motion.
I will make a motion to approve phase 1 of the final plat for Burke Hill at Crabapple located Howes and Rucker Roads, with the condition that the number of certificates of occupancy will be limited to 4 until phase 2 of which would be the remainder of the property. Final plat is approved by mayor and council.
Motion by Councilmember Depolito with conditions of 4 COs. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Text amendment to Article 12.7 flood damage prevention and Article 13.11 variance of the Unified Development Code. This is the second reading of the ordinance. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you. These are changes to clean up, clarify language in our flood protection ordinance. Basically better defining terminology. The changes were initiated by the Metro District Water Planning District. I can try and summarize the changes. I know you've seen them before. If you have any further questions.
If you can summarize the changes for the folks in the audience. That'd be a summary, not a detailed.
Okay, so basically, like I said, it's clearing up some language, some definitions, changing terminology. These were changes that were initiated by the Metro District, and
so this is to make our ordinance consistent with the regional and state.
Right, and for us to stay in the floodplain insurance program, which we'd like to do.
Making sure we're in compliance with state law.
Correct.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Price.
Just a quick question on page 250. Number 3 on the right-hand column.
1250.
I'm sorry, page 250?
Oh, your packet? I don't have that page.
Yeah, the packet. Well, it's Article 12, 12.7.6 B3.
Is that on page 251, the recreational vehicles?
No. It's under the section variance procedures, 12.7.6, and then under B, conditions for variances. Anyway, it was just, it's not critical, but I just wondered why it was written in the, as a description of the increase in the costs may be as high as $25 for each $100 of coverage provided. And I don't know how that might change over time, or if that's anything to worry about, but, I mean, I guess it's basically written as a percent, so probably doesn't matter, but, I mean, I wonder if it could actually be higher than that, or if we want to be so specific. And I don't know if that's our wording or someone else's.
That is not our wording.
I can't read that. I mean, I guess basically what we're trying to say is it could increase your insurance premium by 25%.
I believe so.
I just wonder if that's a simpler way to say it, or it doesn't really matter, but I mean, I would make that recommendation if it didn't upset the feds.
Make a recommendation for,
Just to say that it could increase your costs for your insurance around approximately 25%.
Do we know that as a fact? Do we have evidence to support that figure? Councilmember Price, do you have any evidence to support that figure?
No, I suspect it'll be higher. That's why I'm wondering if we put it in here and,
Well, I'd hate putting things into a ordinance that are not supported by some fact.
well, that's what this is. It's already in there.
I understand that's what they've put in there, but if we're going to change that, we're going to take a position of what the increase could be. I would hate to speculate. I understand we're trying to track state law and federal law, but if we're going to make a change to it, we should have some basis in fact for our position.
And that was my question. Is this wording that was given to us specifically?
The answer is yes.
Yes.
And I'm not here to question the judgment of the feds or the state. I wouldn't want to be put in that position, but if we're going to take a position, I don't want to be as cavalier as the feds and the state are sometimes. I'd like to have our position based upon fact. Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. For clarification, this is verbatim from the federal government?
yes.
I agree. I've always found it odd that they would put dollar amounts in here for that, but
They're odd, they can be odd. I don't think we need to follow their example.
well, if we took out that portion of the sentence altogether, that doesn't change the meaning of the paragraph. It just eliminates a guess as to what may happen. Correct?
Caleb.
I think one of the reasons it's in there is to give the public an idea of what it might be. If we remove it, then they have no idea at all what it might be. So from a point of reference.
Perhaps we put it in parentheses, federal government language. And we can disclaim any responsibility.
Well, if we're trying to be consistent, we probably ought to leave it in, unless it's problematic.
Well, the federal government's problematic, but we have to work with it. Councilmember Diamond.
So if it's, say, $35 per 100, do we have any recourse if somebody comes back and says, in our ordinance, it says 25? How does that?
Maybe.
Yeah. But as high as, so if it were higher,
Mr. Davidson, do you think this is going to create any liability for the city of Roswell if we leave this language in or take it out?
I do not. Our explanation would be we'd be following the federal guidelines. So that's exactly what it says in the feds.
so would you be comfortable leaving that line off?
I'm fine leaving it off.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I'm not voting for it, so I'm not going to move for it either.
All right, move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
Oh, yes, there was another item on the next page, page 252. And I'm sorry if someone could provide y'all with that. So it's like two pages hence. And there's an item in here talking about manufactured home park or subdivision. I don't know that do we allow manufactured home parks?
As part of the Federal Housing Act, we allow them in industrial.
Okay, but in any case, it says here, as long as the concrete pad is completed before June 15th, 1998, do we have anything such as that in Roswell?
Not to my knowledge.
So do we even need this, or are we just putting it in?
Yes, we need to include it.
Because they said so?
Correct.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Oh, we need to read it. I apologize. We need the first reading. This will come back for another reading.
This is second.
This is the second reading.
This is second.
This is second reading of the ordinance.
It's an ordinance to amend Article 12 of the Unified Development Code, Section 12.7, to bring the city's floodplain ordinance in line with federal guidelines with respect to the National Flood Insurance Program. Now therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the second reading.
Any further questions after we've had a second reading? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That's Councilmember Dippolito and Diamond. All opposed. That's Price. Passes 2-1. Public safety, if you'll read that agenda item, Ms. Love.
Thank you. Approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contribution agreement by and between the North Fulton Regional Radio System Authority and the city of Roswell.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I've got two items to present. Both of them are IGAs relating to two separate radio systems. The first one will be between the city of Roswell and the North Fulton Radio Authority. What this basically does is spell out the agreement as to how much our share will be. And if you look at Exhibit A, you can see it's based on population, land mass, and the number of radios in the system. And then at the bottom, the overall percentage of what actually Roswell will be paying. You see overall our percentage is 32% for the authority.
Just out of curiosity, we're at 32 and Sandy Springs with a larger population is at 20, about 30%. Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, if you look at the breakdown for the population,
Yeah.
they're higher on population, we're higher on land mass, and really the difference comes down to the if everything is weighted equally, between the three, the difference would be the number of radios we have on our system versus the number of radios that Sandy Springs has on their system.
And just, do we have more firemen and police per capita? Is that why it works out?
We have more policemen than
Sandy Springs
does. I'm really not sure about firemen.
More policemen and firemen.
We have more
so
fire
we've
and
got
police.
a more robust public safety department.
I would agree with that statement.
Just based upon those facts. Just checking. I support that. Any other questions? Councilmember Price.
I guess based on our land mass, because it's not population, but can we justify 33% more radios than Sandy Springs has?
Well, we have more police officers and more firemen than them, and that's the difference there. And the next IG I'm going to talk about is the one that we'll be paying into Fulton County. We'll be talking specifically about the number of radios that we do have. But we're actually in the process now. We started it last week of doing an inventory of all of our radios, police and fire, to make sure that we don't have any unnecessary radios on the system. I don't believe that we're going to find that we do, and that is due December 15th to me and the fire chief. So if we do have any that are unnecessary, then we obviously won't have those radios turned on.
So are those radios that are assigned to a person or a location or what?
Well, in the situation with the police department, each officer has a car with a radio in it, and they also have a portable that they wear on their belt. So almost all police officers have 2 radios.
Is that the same in other cities?
Yes. But we have more policemen than.
We have 33% more?
No. I can't explain why theirs is so much lower. We don't have, we got, each officer.
Smoke signals, they use smoke signals in Sandy Springs.
Yeah, each officer has 2 radios, for their car and themselves. The firemen all have a portable. All the fire trucks have portables on there. We don't have any. And now what we have done since last year is we've hired more police officers. We've increased the number of police officers that we actually have from when we did the jail redesign. Y'all created more police officer positions.
So this little thing on your shoulder is one of your radios?
Correct. Well, the radio's actually right here.
Right, I mean, so
this is the microphone.
one on the person and then one in the car?
Correct.
So can you slide that up again? So the weighted again is
Probably a way to back this out. So you can see in population, if you're looking at Sandy Springs, they're ahead with the math I can do in my head. We're about even on population, and then looking at land mass. When you compare land mass and population, it's kind of a wash between the 2 cities. The only real difference is in the number of radios that they have and we have.
Mm-hmm. So what does that amount to, though, in terms of bottom line difference?
We have a better police and fire department.
If you look at the very bottom, the weighted amount here for Roswell, we're at 32%, and then that would be the amount at 32% of the 16 million that we have budgeted for this.
Councilmember Diamond.
So Chief, that doesn't necessarily mean if we took away radios, it would alter that number significantly. The radios are just a piece of the total, correct?
Right. If you look at the radios is just a small percentage of how it's figured. So yeah, if we took radios away, it would lower the percentage, but then you'd also have police officers or firemen without radios.
No, and I'm not suggesting that. I guess my point is that, you can't look at that total of what we're paying as a collective and start subtracting radios to get to a total.
Right. We're roughly, just the math in my head, less than 2.5% from the total number that Sandy Springs has when you compare the weighted share.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very close to what Sandy Springs is paying.
Kay would like to say something, but this weighted average was a matter of negotiation which the city has accepted.
And that was my point. So if you recall, back in January of 2013, we entered into an IGA for this radio system. This was based on the capitalization of the system, not ongoing maintenance and operation. So we will revisit the maintenance and operation numbers, which will include the number of radios once the system is up. But we have committed to $5.1 million. You funded it. We signed the IGA. This is simply the administrative fact that now the authority has been formed and created, and we are transferring that capitalization, those assets, to the authority. Sandy Spring has acted as our agent from a procurement standpoint to make the purchases and get contracts in place so that we could construct the system. So this is very much administrative in nature. Nothing has changed related to our commitment since this original IGA.
It's funded, we have a contract.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Councilmember DePolito.
Thank you. During committee, I had suggested that under section 3, under the maintenance, that where it says periodically the Board of Managers shall reevaluate portioning of contributions to maintenance, et cetera, that we set a time limit on there rather than just leave it as periodically. I think that these weighted shares will change as populations change and people start to use things differently. So I would like to see us do that at least at a minimum of every 5 years. And I understand that this contract will expire at some point, but, you know, I would like to have a commitment in there at least every 5 years, if not shorter time frame.
I'd like to see it more often than 5 years. K-Love.
The authority on which I sit will be revisiting it annually. However, just from a protocol standpoint, the other cities have adopted the agreement in the current form. Should this council decide to make changes to the IGA, you can't bind the other cities. I will represent your wishes at the authority, but I am one vote, and the other members may not be compelled to go along with that 5-year or 3-year or 2-year. Like I said, our intention, once the system becomes operational in the April to June 2015 time period, we will be revisiting it every year because we will have to establish a budget each year, just as each city does, the authority will. So whatever changes you make here, I will carry out your wishes, but we can't compel the authority as a whole to do so.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve for the mayor and city administrator to sign a contribution agreement by and between the North Fulton Regional Radio System Authority and the city of Roswell, as written, with the change in section 3 to change the word periodically to annually.
I would hope that you would reserve that. I think we can propose that at a later date, but again, we're going to have to go back to all the cities to renegotiate this agreement if we change that one provision. I think we can make a request following this that they make that change. But to say we don't have an agreement, the other 4 cities have to change until 3 cities have to change and to get the agreement. I think you're creating other issues. So I would hope that the council would reconsider that. We have a motion. Is there a second? Councilmember Diamond.
So if we put it in here, it goes back and Kay goes to the radio authority and asks to do that, and then they renegotiate. If we don't put it in there, you go back and say we'd like to do it every year. Either way, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you have that direction, so I think I'm comfortable with that, but I would like to look at doing that in our future agreements, to have that in there rather than start all over.
We do not have a second yet. Mr. DiPolito, are you willing to reconsider your motion to get a second?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right.
While
I
he's
guess-
thinking, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Or is he
Actually,
finished thinking?
yeah, I had a question. I guess what is the timing of this agreement? When does it need to be in place?
They had asked that we get it in place in October, and every city didn't comply. So we are the last city, and so the authority has been established, so it is an administrative item that we should have already taken care of. In actuality, we're operating like that, but this is the required documents. So it's at the pleasure of the council at this point. Like I said, the other cities have adopted it, approved it. It's on record at the authority, and
Is this the first we've seen of this agreement,
it was at committee.
other than committee?
You saw, the IGA is quite similar to this that you approved in 2013.
I guess I'm wondering why we're seeing it after the other cities have adopted it, and now we're being pressured into accepting it as is.
Notice you're not being pressured. It is up to each city as to how we take it forward. So it was presented by the authority's attorney, so for each city to carry it through their governing body's process for approval. So I brought it through our normal process, which is committee, and then followed to whichever council meeting the committee wishes to take it up.
Councilmember Price.
Just a clarification of the timeline. that we've had, because we have built or in the process of building a number of towers already, or not we, but the entity. Is that correct?
I believe all the towers are constructed with the exception of the Fouts Road Tower. As I was sitting here tonight, Captain Sweeney sent me an email and a picture showing the Lackey Road Tower complete.
It's finished. So the only one that's not finished is Fouts.
That's my understanding, that Fouts is not complete
Okay,
yet.
so this agreement indicates, though, that we might erect more towers? Or we'll have to erect more towers, or what's the plan?
Now, all the towers that are under construction are all the towers that we plan. Now, if, in this agreement talks about adding additional towers, but that also has the possibility of adding other jurisdictions to the system.
There's no current intention to build any more towers.
For example, if Johns Creek were to be added to our system, they would need additional towers to cover Johns Creek. So more towers may be needed to be built for that, but then Johns Creek would be funding that, not Roswell.
That would require the cities accepting Johns Creek.
Correct.
That
I
hasn't been done.
just use that as an example.
And north of the river, how many towers are there? Or,
North of the river,
well, let's say north of
I believe there's 7 towers
North of City of Atlanta, let's
total.
say.
We have 3 in Roswell. There's 1 in Milton, so that's 4, and then 1 in Johns Creek. So I believe it's 5 north of the river.
And Sandy Springs has 1 or 2?
At least 2.
Okay. All right, thank you.
At this point in time, we have a motion with no second. Is there an alternate motion? Yes, sir.
I'd like to amend my motion. Let's try this. To approve the document as written for a period of 1 year with the intention of revisiting Section 3, specifically the term periodically, and seeing if we can get buy-in from the other cities for annually or biannually, but some time period.
I am confident that the other cities were not going to have a problem with the 1 year, but Kay, can we approve this for on a 1 year time frame? Does that create a problem,
I don't-
City Attorney?
I don't believe there's a term in this agreement, Mr. City Attorney.
There's not.
But, well, go ahead, Mr. City Attorney.
There's not a term in here. So,
How long are we bound by this agreement if we accept it tonight?
well, you're funding the,
I understand it's funded, so that's, the $5 million is gone.
right, correct.
But how long are we bound by this agreement? If we wish to change our position in 12 months, can we?
I think we can withdraw from the authority whenever you
I
want
think we
to
could.
withdraw.
I'm not sure that'd be a wise choice, but we could.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Kay Love.
To the point of the amount of time we're bound, I think since this is just the contribution agreement and that funding, then at the point where we have spent the $5.1 million, there's nothing more related to this funding agreement that binds us. We will then review the maintenance and operations and have to set a budget so you could
So is
control
maintenance and
it.
operations a separate agreement?
It's not a separate agreement, but the provision for funding, there is no funding in this at this point?
There's no funding for maintenance and operations?
Correct.
So to fund maintenance and operations next year is going to require another,
Action by both the authority and each city. So at that point, and I'm confident that the intent of my counterparts and myself was to look at this annually because of our budget process, as the authority will. I can't speak for them, but I'm confident that we can.
so perhaps the best way to look at this is an allocation of the capital cost, not an allocation of the ongoing cost.
Correct.
Right.
From a capital allocation, we make this decision, the capital allocation is complete, which is
Correct.
within the budget which we proposed and consistent with the IGA.
Correct, and this funding agreement on these weighted percentages is based for capitalization. Each time we review the maintenance and operation, that percentage can change based on number of radios and population.
This agreement isn't binding us to any time period for the annual budget.
No, sir. You do that annually anyway, as does the authority.
So we could put in here, it's only binding for 1 year, it's not gonna make any difference. Because the money's already spent.
It's just a contribution agreement.
It's just a contribution agreement. I'm not sure how. Mr. Davidson, you perhaps need to tell us how to craft that.
I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would just wait for the ongoing maintenance and operation agreement to come to the council when they do their budget. You'll have to agree to your share of it, so.
Mr. DiPolito, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I guess I'm confused by that because there's a section in here specifically regarding maintenance. So it sounds like we're agreeing to maintenance in this document.
We are agreeing to it, however, we're not agreeing to a specific percentage going forward because it will be reevaluated. It could be this Exhibit A, but Exhibit A is what's subject to change. So as long as we are going to be a part of the system, we have agreed to maintain it based on a weighted share. But that weighted share can change. And no matter how often we say we're going to review it in this contribution agreement, it is controlled by the annual appropriation of the budget by both each participating city and the authority itself. I guess my point was to get to your concern, it will be looked at each year.
Let me rephrase it differently. If we pass this agreement as proposed, are we bound to contribute based upon this weighted share next year? Is this the council
Yes.
obligated to meet that commitment next year?
It says the city shall pay its weighted share of all maintenance, so forth and so on.
Well, are we bound by this weighted share, or can that weighted share be changed?
The weighted share can be changed based upon the authority's reevaluation, the portioning of those contributions based on the total maintenance cost, number of radios.
Well, I'm afraid to ask this question, but if we said we disagree with that calculation, that our numbers have now changed to 480 radios, are they bound to accept that change?
They're not bound to accept it per se, however, we will have to discuss it just as in any other city as their radio count changes, because every year it could change. They could add more people, they could eliminate radios, and so our expectation is that it will be revisited on an annual basis for that reason. You may add
Could
police
they
officers.
sue us under this contract and say, it used to be 489 radios, you signed this agreement and you can't change it now because we haven't made the decision to the rest of us don't want to reevaluate it?
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't you go back and ask the other cities if they would, how they would feel about this change?
I would be happy to.
And let's defer this if the council wishes to, and we can avoid it's a more polite way to go to them and say, please consider our change than perhaps taking a vote and saying our way or the highway.
I'll be happy to do that at the meeting in December. It's the first Tuesday in December.
How would the council feel about a deferral until Kay gets a chance to talk to the other cities? Do we have a motion to defer?
So moved.
Motion to defer by Councilmember Price. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. All in favor, raise their hands.
One question.
Sure.
How many people are on the authority, and what is our percent of influence on that body?
They're the county managers from Milton, Alpharetta, Sandy Springs, and our city administrator from Roswell. So 4 board members.
I don't anticipate that we're going to have a problem. The mayors, I'm sure, can work this out if and without any real issues, because I think there is an expectation of, as population changes and as radios change, that this will change. Square mile's not going to change. But I expect Sandy Springs is going to be pressured to add more police over time, as all of us are probably going to we'll all probably be adding more radios over time, and every city, I expect will be, I don't anticipate a problem renegotiating this. But I would encourage the council to defer this until Kay can talk to the mayor, to the other cities, and we can politely ask them to change. Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, and I just wanted to point out something you just said about renegotiating it. My goal is to not have to renegotiate it. If we have a mechanism in here where it's automatically adjusted, then we don't have a discussion periodically about whether it should be adjusted or not. And we've gone ahead and now said we're going to do it on a regular basis, and it just happens. So it's trying to avoid that ongoing political battle potential.
Good point. Do we have a motion to defer? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on deferral? All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Passes unanimously.
Approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Fulton County and the City of Roswell for the provision of 800 megahertz radio system access. Chief Grant.
This is the second IG I had discussed. This one will be between the City of Roswell and Fulton County, and this is the radio system that we currently use. It's anticipated that the authority system will be up and running around April 1st. So a difference between this IGA and the IGA you've seen in the past. In the past, they were all based on an annual cost per radio. This year, because the system will be shut down sometime during the next year, the cost is based on per quarter. So the total number of radios that we have now actually has gone up from that previous IGA that we discussed. It's 527 radios at $82.50 per quarter. So the first quarter will be $43,477.50. We anticipate only needing 2 quarters, which would be $86,955 for the 2 quarters ending in end of June.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Diamond.
Can we revisit the last issue? I think we've red flagged something we shouldn't have.
Before we came up with this 527, we were at, I think, 579, and we went through and realized that what had happened there is that we had added new radios and had gotten turned, and we had notified Fulton County to turn off radios. Well, they didn't turn off the radios we told them to turn off. So that's why we were at 579. We went back and checked our actual numbers. We came up with 527, and now those other radios have been turned off.
Does the council have any other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. So, Chief, we're going to reduce this number even further as we move forward?
Probably not. As we move forward, what we're going to do is we're going to get a good count, firm count, make me see, and we'll probably come up very close to 527. But as we add more police officers, we'll be adding more officers. I think right now we're around 9 vacancies. We do have some extra radios that are turned on, ready to give to officers when they're hired, and also if somebody's radio breaks to hand them. So it could go up a little more, but I don't see a significant decrease in the number of radios that we have unless we just rethink how we do radios.
With Rommel in action, I'm afraid we're going to have to get more radios.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve. And I wasn't kidding about revisiting the last vote.
You can talk to Kay. That's just a deferral. We didn't take a vote on where we're going. Motion and a second for deferral. All in favor of, not for approval. Motion and a second for approval of the IGA with Fulton County. All in favor, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Approval of a resolution to apply for an FY 2014 Assistance to Firefighters Grant in the amount of $470,322 for self-contained breathing apparatus. Chief Burnett.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to ask for approval for resolution to apply for the 2014 Assistant to Firefighters Grant in the amount of $470,322. And this will be for our breathing apparatus that we use when our firefighters go into hazardous conditions. This will be for 80 new air packs, 180 carbon air bottles, 140 new face masks, and 8 air shorelines adapters that will go fit onto our ladder trucks, so in case we have to go up in the ladder trucks and breathe air. The current ones we have are almost 15 years old, and the bottles themselves in early 2017 will be out of service or non-compliant. They won't be out of service, but they'll be non-compliant. So we're asking for a chance to apply for this grant. If not, we'll be asking in the 16-17 budget for
What's
this money.
the city's share?
Sir?
The city's share of this, I
The
assume this is a
share, I
matching
believe,
grant.
is 10%, and which is 52,000, I believe, 258.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion for approval by Councilmember Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Councilmember Diamond.
Thank you, sir. This item is approval of an amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, Chapter 21, Telecommunications and Cable Services, to add a new section 21.4, establishing clean pole policy, authority, and procedures. And this will be the second reading, and Mr. Asenbrack is here to talk about it.
Councilmember Diamond, thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As Councilmember Diamond mentioned, this is a new policy to authorize our clean poles. The ordinance states that the placement and the wires other than power is prohibited, and attachment constitutes a misdemeanor by the city ordinance. This will help the city to remove visual clutter such as overhead wires from city streets and will provide opportunity for more landscape options. I can answer any questions.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Asenbrack, at the last council meeting, we discussed the signs that we're going to use that say no wires. Have you thought a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact,
All right.
I have some pictures for you here.
I like the small one.
They're, looking at the actual language of the ordinance, what really is, there's two parts here. One is the idea that we're going to negotiate with developers and people to locate wires underground or reroute them. But the second part is the notification, and it says that the utility poles covered under this agreement shall be labeled. So we were required to label them, and it says provide convenient notice. So we've kicked around different options like stripes, codes, tags, but at the end of the day, it has to be something that is reasonable for somebody to, we've got to transmit this desire to maintain this clean pole. And these signs are very small. When you, it really doesn't really show up here. I had these pictures 8.5 by 11, but I just sort of consolidated them. The size, the shape, they'll be very small, very innocuous. They'll probably blend into the background, but they are required as part of this ordinance. So we will, and we can continue to refine this going forward, but it's just, I think, reasonable notice and it meets the intent of the ordinance.
How high off the ground will they be?
It doesn't. It says convenient notice, so they'll probably be within like your visual spectrum, say 6 to 8 feet off the ground.
Couldn't we put them up higher, since that's where somebody stringing wires would be, so you really wouldn't see them?
We talked about that. I can put them up higher, but then they need to be bigger so that people can read. What is that mouse type on the pole at 15 feet? So.
Well, they have to be legible from the sidewalk or from a bucket truck?
It just says provide convenient notice. So.
Some folks think bucket trucks are not convenient to everybody.
I think they're convenient if you're hanging wires.
I think we have some flexibility in this, and I think we will take your guidance to heart in the field and do what we can to balance this notice with visual clutter.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Oh, we need first reading. Second reading.
Second reading.
Thank you. This is an ordinance of the City of Roswell providing for the Clean Power Utility Pole Policy. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority, do hereby ordain to add to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances a section to be inserted as section 21.4 to include the following subsections, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this is the second reading.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve this at the highest feasible location.
Is there a second? Motion by Councilmember Diamond, second by Councilmember Price. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And the next item is deferred. We have a recommendation for personnel. We're not going to be discussing litigation or real estate enclosure. We got a brief personnel discussion. Do we have a motion for closure to discuss personnel?
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Price, second by Diamond. All in favor, raise their hands. Unanimous, we're adjourned.
Mr. Mayor, will you sign this right quick?
We need to reassemble in the conference room.